I was actually asked to talk about how the functioning of the real estate market affects and can affect place-based solutions, can affect how we think about goals and metrics for success and those kinds of things. And real estate markets are incredibly good at pricing amenities. So amenities are those goods and bad things that are implicit in place, right? So what am I talking about? I'm talking about schools. I'm talking about access to jobs, access to transportation. I'm talking about exposure to toxins. I'm talking about public safety issues. Real estate markets do this. And they do this actually as information about these things come out, do it fairly rapidly, in fact. And so what does that mean? Well, one of the things that people often look at in terms of neighborhoods and our concern about things like affordable housing and so forth is we look at rent growth and rent changes and those kinds of things. And so the question I ask you just to think about just real quickly is, would you rather live in a neighborhood where rents are going up or down? Okay. So most of you answered up, and there's a reason why you answered up. Because if you are in a neighborhood where rents are going down, it likely means that either schools are getting worse, access to jobs is getting worse, access to transportation is getting worse, exposure to toxins is increasing, public safety is deteriorating. Those are the kinds of things, right? So we don't want to live in those places. Although for you individually, you might like your rent to go down as everybody else's rent is going up. The power of the forces in real estate markets don't allow that to happen very well. And there are consequences to try to imposing large-scale policy solutions to force that to happen, right? We want to live in places. We want these communities to reflect the kinds of positive changes in all of those things. We want schools to get better. We want these places to be places where people have access to jobs and so forth. So in that context, when we're thinking about kind of affordable housing and kind of how we imagine communities to evolve, we know that policies, sometimes affordable housing policies actually work to concentrate poverty, and we've seen those over the past 50 years, and we've seen the reactions to those. We've seen policy in the housing space to look to kind of how do we create mixed income communities. And you can do that by inclusionary zoning, and there's pros and cons to different kinds of ordinances around inclusionary zoning, and I can talk more about that later. You can do that with other kinds of structure and policy. One of the things that actually happens, just organically as neighborhoods are improving sometimes is you have people with more resources that might have access to better jobs that start moving into the neighborhood, right? And we start to worry about rents coming up. We worry about displacement. We use terms like gentrification, right, which have a particular connotation to them as something we're trying to fight against, right? But then we really have to, again, I like to think about the question in terms of at least those four elements. Like, are rents going up because schools are getting better? Are rents going up? And then you go down the list, right? Public safety, toxic environments, jobs. If they are, this is actually not something we would try to fight against. In fact, if we believe that mixed income neighborhoods are a good thing, the fact that some people with higher incomes are moving into neighborhoods that were more concentrated might itself not be a bad thing, depending on whether you believe that the kind of spillover effects from having those neighbors with kind of access and connections and role modeling effects, matter. So we have to think about it in a more kind of nuanced way. Of course, we're going to be concerned about displacement and rents going up if for some reason they're going up when the residents are not achieving access to better jobs, if they're not being reduced, their access to toxins, if public safety is not improving, and those kinds of things. So that's the way I hope that maybe organizing our thoughts around real estate markets can help us. So when we have these opportunities, as we have, for example, in Los Angeles, with new opportunities to transit stations, hubs, and so forth, those actually are opportunities to think very creatively about how one can create mixed income neighborhoods, how one can create access to jobs for for all segments of the population. So we have this opportunity in Los Angeles, and in many other cities where public transit infrastructure is expanding, to really think about how to leverage those new places, new spaces, so that community residents then accrue the benefits that sometimes show up in rents, right? And not face just a rent burden with somehow not getting those benefits.